Hello everyone. Today I want to talk about while loops. So while loops repetitively execute a sequence of statements while a condition remains satisfied. So for a certain condition, while loop is going to go over and over and over until the condition does not satisfy and the loop or iteration will stop. And the basic form of while loop that I can, let me write down while loops. Okay, the basic form of while loop can be like that. So imagine if we have a variable and our variable has some value, some name. Let's say and so these are the name, for example, and then I can say while I, let's say I is one initial value that I'm setting up. Let's say I is starting from 0. So it says when I is less than length of the variable. So what is the length of variable here? The length of variable is 3, right? And remember, we have comma and then indenting is also necessary. So while I is less than the length of variable, let's print the variable index I. So what this does, it says until I is less than the length of the variable we defined, it's going to print the variable I. So for example, if I is equal 0, it's going to say 0 is less than 3, right? Because the length of len of variable is equal 3. So for I equal to, let me explain it here. Okay, so for I equal 0, 0 is less than 3, then print variable 0, right? While I less than the length of variable, this will translate to 0 less than 3, and then we are going to print the variable 0. And then we should increment the I value by 1, for example. What happens at this point after it prints the variable 0, I is going to increase. Now I will be equal to 1, right? Because 0 plus 1 is equal to 1, right? And then it again goes to the second iteration. So let's call this first iteration. And then here, the second iteration, what happens? Now I becomes 1. It says 1 less than 3, which is true. So as long as this condition is true, right? So as long as the condition is true, it's going to print now I is equal 1, and then 1 plus 1, because we are incrementing I at this point, right? And we will have 2. And then another iteration. Now we are in the third iteration. The third iteration says now I is equal to 2 and still 2 is less than 3, right? So we are going to print variable index 2 and then we are incrementing I to 3. And then the fourth iteration, what happens? It says 3 less than 3 and at this point the iteration will stop because 3 is not less than 3, right? 3 is equal 3. So because we don't have equality, so this is going to stop. Why? Because condition doesn't satisfy, right? So here condition was true. Here condition was true. Here also condition was true, but here condition is not true, so it stops. This is all what happens in this above example. Okay, so this is kind of basic of while loop. Imagine there would be a problem if I didn't initialize I. There would be a problem if I initialize I, but I didn't increment I, because it would just go through just first iteration and would print just variable 0. It wouldn't continue, right? Because I'm not incrementing, I'm not decrementing, I'm not changing the value of I. I will stay 0 if I didn't have increment or decrement. Okay, so let's have another example. Let's say x is equal to, while x is greater than 0, print x. Now I'm going to decrement the x value by 1 and then print. Okay, so let's see what happens in this situation. So this condition you see here could be x equal x minus 1, right? So what we call that? Decrementing. Correct? Let's see what happens. So what happens? It's going to check the condition. Because x is greater than 2, it's going to say true. Let's print x value and then decrement x value and then print the last message. And then what happens? Because still x is greater than 0. Why? Because when we decrement x, 2 minus 1 is equal 1, right? So still 1 is greater than 0, and it's going to go through all of these. And then 1 will decrement by 1 point. It will become 0, and then at that point the condition is not true anymore because 0 is not greater than 0. So I remembered, actually I will write down the same thing as here for this one, but let's run this one. I forgot to run this. Okay, so what happens? At first, when I is equal to 0, it's going to check the condition. 0 is less than 3. Then it's going to print variable 0, which is addition. Then it's going to increment 0 by 1. So now I is becoming 1. Then it's going to check the condition again. 1 is less than 3. Okay, let's continue. Print the variable I, which is variable 1. Then at that point, this is going to be printed. and then it's going to increment I by 1. Now we have 2. Then it's going to check again. 2 less than 3. Yes, still 2 is less than 3. Let's print variable 2, index 2, which is this one, and then 2 plus 1 becomes 3, but now the condition is not true anymore because 3 less than 3 is not true. Okay, so let's write about this one. So we start with x equal to, right? Then first iteration is going to be while x greater than 0, which is 2 greater than 0, which is true, right? And then now what happened? Then print x, which is equal to 2, right? And then what happens? Now x is going to be x minus 1, then 2 minus 1 is equal to 1, right? So now x value is 1. And then again print hi everyone, correct? This is the first iteration. And then the second iteration, let's check. Now x is equal 1, right? 1 greater than 0, which is true. Then print x equal 1, right? And then now decrementing x becomes 0, but still we must print hi everyone. So this was the second iteration, right? And then for the third iteration, now x is equal 0. It's going to check to see if 0 is greater than 0, which is false. Then none of this is going to happen, and at this point while loop will stop. Okay, I hope this writing in this way helped you to understand what while loop does. So at each point it's going to check the condition. As long as the condition is true, it's going to print the result or do whatever we are asking for. If the condition is false, it's going to stop the iteration. Okay, next example. Now we are going to say x is equal to 2. Oh, actually, let's try the same one. But this time, what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring the print here. So this one, print is still going to happen in each single iteration because indenting says this is a part of while loop, right? This is a part of loop. But as soon as I bring this outside of the indentation, it's going to say, okay, this is going to happen after the whole while loop stops. So here, note the difference. So now what happens? Now it's going to print 2, again going to go through the second loop, then going to print what is that, 1, and then after everything is done, it's going to print hi everyone. So it's not going to print hi everyone in each single iteration like this one. So the same thing will happen, but but this is not going to happen here. This is not going to happen here, right? It's going to happen, it's going to happen, I don't know why it does that, jumping over and over. Okay, it's going to happen here at the end. Then after while loop is finished, then print hi everyone. Okay, so now let's have another example. In this example, we are going to define the Celsius Is this correct? Let me check. Yes, correct. Okay, so what I'm doing now, I'm defining a degree of Celsius, and I'm saying while Celsius of degree is less than or equal to 40, then convert this to Fahrenheit. How? 9 divided by 5 multiply C plus 32. This is the conversion. Fahrenheit to Celsius. And then now print C equal to, and then let's use str of C. We are making the value of Celsius to a string, and then plus, now I'm going to say Fahrenheit is equal to str and Fahrenheit. I'm going to add and here and enough space. Okay, so now I'm going to increase the Celsius by 4 degrees. Okay, so let's see what happens. So one thing I should mention again, you always must initialize the value you have in the expression. So if I don't initialize this loop is not going to work. It's going to give you an error because it doesn't know what is C, right? Okay, so now before even go through the loop, let's check what happens. The first iteration, C is -20, right? So -20 is less than 40. Is that true? If it is true, we are going to go through the loop, convert Fahrenheit, Celsius to Fahrenheit. We are going to print out the result. We are going to increment the degree of Celsius by 4. So if we increment to -20 by 4, we will have -16, right? And then -16 is still less than equal 40, right? And then it's going to do all of these, and then -16 is going to increment 4, so we will have -12. -12 is still less than 40, and then it's going to do all of these, and then -12 plus 4, and on until we have a value which is not less than or equal 40. So here I'm going to add this loop continues until the value of C is not less than or equal 40, right? Let's run this. you see what happens now. For negative 20, we have this Fahrenheit, 16, 12, and until we reach C equals 40, which is Fahrenheit of 104. And at that point, after that, because 40 plus 4 is not less than equal 40, then it's going to stop, right? Okay, so this was another example of for loop. Let's see what other example we have. Okay, another example. Okay, so x is equal 0, y is equal 5, let's say, and then I say while, now I have defined two variables, right? X is less than y, then print x I want to show you the process of what happened. You know what? Normally, when we are talking about while loop, if loop, we use I and J. So, I and J are very common to use in loops. So, let me use I and J. I plus str I. So, it's going to print I, right? And then plus and J is equal to strj. So I'm just printing I and J in each iteration as long as I is less than J, right? Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to say now increment I by 1, right? And then now print both of them. Actually just I, because I'm just incrementing I, right? And then after everything is finished, I'm going to say print, oops, print what? Stop. Okay, so let's see what happens. Run this. Okay, so this one. Okay, so now what happens? When I is equal 0, I less than j is true. So it prints I is equal 0 and j is equal 5. And then it's going to increment I. And then look, we don't print out a stop. Why? Because the stop is not part of the loop, right? And then it's going to print out the next iteration when I is increased, and then when I is equal 1, 1 less than 5 is true, so it's going to print this, increment I, and then it's going to print I, right? So to make, actually, these things I'm doing, I taught loop everything to myself years ago, and I went through all these experiments to see what exactly happens when the kind of iteration, in each iteration, what exactly happens. So when I was printing in this way, if I had more numbers, for example, more iteration, it would get confusing for me. So what I would do, I would create a gap or create a kind of next line, separate them with lines, so it made it more clear for me. And then later also, when I was writing a program, I had to do these to, if I had any error or anything, I had to use this kind of things to make sure the while loop or for loop are going well and nothing is wrong. And with this printing, you could easily find out where exactly you have a problem. And later, when you're more professional, you can learn debugging, and also debugging does the similar thing for you. So you can go through the loop and figure out what is wrong and what part of loop you are missing something or the problem is happening. Okay, so in this way, now you are going to see each iteration separated by a line, right? So, and then at the end, when we are done, it's going to print stop. So when it's going to done, when 4 is less than 5, means I incremented to 4 and went through this loop, then the next I would be 5, right? And then it's going to check this and we'll see, well, 5 is not less than 5 anymore. Then it's going to jump, go to the last line, and it's going to print this stop. Okay, so another question. Let's see what we can have. Well, sometimes let's see. Sometimes you can. Oh, you know what happens? Imagine if I increment j as well. What happens? This loop is going to go on and on and on, because when I increase I, then increase j, so this condition will be always true, right? And I'm going to let the loop go on and on and on, over and over, and it's going to be infinite loop, means it's not going to stop at all. But when I decrement this loop, this j by 1, let's see what happens. Let me increase this to 10 and then start this with 0. So let's see what happens if I do this. Okay, so in this situation, actually I need to print, you know what, I'm messing up this question. I'm going to print it here and fix this one for you, and then this will be the next question, right? Okay, you keep this one, and then this is the new question for you. I'm decrementing j, incrementing I, and look what happens here. Run. Okay, so what happens? I is less than 10, right? I noticed this. I changed I and j to 0 and 10, right? So 0 is less than 10. It's going to print this for me, 0 and 10, and then it's going to increment I 1 by 1 and then decrement j by 1. So now I is 1, j is 9, and then it's going to check this condition. I is less than j, right? And if I is less than j, it's going to continue and go through the next one. Now I is 1 and j is 9, and it's going to print everything until now we reach I equal 5, j equal 5, and the loop will stop. Okay, so I have another example. Actually, this will be very interesting because I remember when I learned this one years ago, it was very kind of useful for me. Okay, so I'm going to change this loop a little bit. I'm going to bring this here. So what happens at the end when loop is done, then we will have a kind of print out in the next line. And then here I'm going to print I less than j. I'm going to print the same thing that you see here, right? So what happens? Do you remember what I less than j does? Let's try it here. I is equal 0, j is equal to 10, So print I less than j. Do you remember what happens here? This is a Boolean expression. Boolean expression. The result is going to be either true or false. True. And then while this condition is true, it's going to go through this, right? So at this point, I am trying to print out the result of I less than j in this way. So this is going to try printing I less than j in a Boolean expression form. So what happens, you will see if the condition is true or false for the next round or next iteration. Let's run this. Okay, so you see that now. It says I is equals 0, j is 10, and then increment and decrement them. And then it's going to check the result. So if the result of a statement is true, it's going to go to another round, right? If the result is true, it goes to another round. True, true, until we reach false and stop. So when the condition is false, it's a stop. So let's bring this one line after, and then now you will see everything better. So, well, I'm kind of picky about this. What about this one? Well, this makes everything easy to understand, right? Okay, so I hope you liked this video and you understood how while loop works. Let me know if you have any question, and I will come back with the next video about while loop. Take care of yourself. We'll see you later.